Hey YouTube, Moose Cow here with a post-game update. Happy New Year. It is January 1st, so I figure I might as well kick off the new year, 2024, with a announcement for Kings and Kaisers. Um, Madman and I have finished work on our rule book and the wording and setup and adjustments and so on and so forth. And so with the conclusion of our Operation 1.5 game, 1.5.2 game, that's just what we called it. The rule set is still 1.5. With the conclusion of that game, Madman and I have we're progressively making notes of what our changes were going to be with how that game unfolded, and these are going to be. I'm going to give you guys an overview. These are going to be the final changes for Kings and Kaisers version 1.5, and after this, it is considered locked as far as I'm concerned, at least. Now, we could, of course, release like an expansion manual later on down the road. That's something I've long toyed with. But for the most part, in terms of like this game, this version of this game, this is going to be it. These are going to be the final changes. And we really have this at a highly refined point of creation, I guess. So there's no map changes. We've been changing a few national objectives still, and now with how we have it now, these will be the final card deck, like national objectives and other other cards for the Kings and Kaisers card deck. Those will all be locked after this. Although I still have to finish work on a few of the like political situation cards and stuff, but for the most part, the card deck we have is locked. But the manual is locked, and the wording, that was what we were working on for a large chunk of it and making sure everything was crystal clear. But then also, as we were playing this game, we were deciding on a few things to tweak. And this was the first game where the Zimmerman telegram actually came into play, and we saw how that affected things. So a lot of these changes actually stem from that, because that was a new inclusion. And also just to make the game better. So without just going into too much over the top detail, I'm just going to get into what we're changing, and I just want to announce that Madman, we have, so the wording for the manual is set. Madman has to finish updating the manual files, but those will be available soon, and he will then also update the we previously put out some update pages in terms of like what has changed from 1.4 to 1.5, and so we'll update those as well. But he just has to do a few visual changes on the manual, but otherwise everything more or less is set with the manual. So yeah, it just very exciting time. We're excited to get this out there for you guys and for other people to start playing this game. It's great. Very happy with this game. I'm not just saying that because I'm the creator. I love this game. Yeah, etc., etc. Madman, of course, is also the co-creator, and some of these changes were, a lot of them were his suggestions, and what things either he noticed and then we came to a consensus on, so on and so forth. And it's just this is it basically. Anyway, so without further ado, I'm just going to go into the setup changes, and I'll kind of discuss a few things. But we're going to add, first things first, we're going to add a few texts on the board. So I don't have the rest of France's stuff set up here, but essentially we're adding a minefield into Lorraine, okay? So that's going to be added. In terms of the Africa victory point, I did announce this during the game, but just as a overview, the Africa victory point is whoever controls the most French, British, German, or Ottoman aligned territories by the end of the game. However, we are now changing that to simply just mainland African territories. So Madagascar for the Africa point no longer counts because it is not a mainland territory. Historically speaking, no action happened there. People volunteered from Madagascar, but no actual action with Germans happened in Madagascar. So this is no longer part of the Africa point. We have added, in New South Wales, we have added a machine gun to kind of give a little bit more of an oomph to the Anzac forces and a little more emphasis on getting these units over here to battle against the Ottomans. So there's now otherwise the setup is the same. There's a naval port, 2 artillery, 3 infantry, but now there's also a machine gun. Okay. I forgot to put a marker down for here, but in Kwangtung for the Republic of China setup, we are adding back an artillery. So now there's two cavalry, 2 infantry, and 1 artillery. And this basically just stemmed from our game, the Empire of China, like overly won against the Republic of China, and part of that was because attacking Zhejiang went so successfully, and there wasn't any ability for the Republic to counter with at least a couple threes to attack there. So now we had originally bumped it down for the Republic to start with just 2 artillery, but now they're going to have 3 artillery. So both sides will have 3 artillery, but the Republic will be able to use 2 from Yan'an and 1 from Kwangtung. Kwangtung right there. So there's that. In terms of the Russian Civil War setup, actually, before I get into that, let me go into some national objective changes. So we play tested with changing this national objective. Changing this national objective to 2 IPCs per territory if Austria-Hungary controls any of these 4 territories while at war with the Russian Empire. And we liked it because of overall with the game, how it's been changed over time. This national objective as it is very difficult, if not impossible to get. So if Austria-Hungary pushes into the Russian Empire while they're at war with them, then they should get, some kind of reward for that that's actually obtainable. And more often than not, usually Austria-Hungary only captures like 1 or 2 territories. They never get 3. So that's that. We play tested with this during the game. If we change it to if Russian Empire controls or contests 2 of the following, and we liked that. Ultimately, that just made this national objective just come into play that much more, and gives Russia a boost right off the bat. Right off the bat with the game, but likely to not keep it. And then this national objective. Per Madman's suggestion, if Serbia is not controlled by Central Powers, we are going to boost this to 3 IPCs. And that just kind of gives emphasis on the Central Powers to crack Serbia as fast as they can, but also the significance of Serbia in World War I. How much of a tough nut Serbia was to crack, so the Russian Empire should get a little bit more of a benefit, basically a free infantry, for the longer this Central Powers put off controlling Serbia. Serbia didn't really fall until Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Bulgaria were all coming at it. So, we like what we've done with Serbia, pretty much. Let's see. Japan, this national objective. Again, both of Japan's national objectives are one-time payments now, but for there being no Central Powers warships in the Pacific Ocean, we are bumping that up to 3 IPCs. So there's that. What else? Okay. Russian Civil War setup. There's a few changes that we're doing to kind of give the Soviets a little bit more flex, but also because the whites just become kind of a pretty big beast early on in the game. So we are adding a fighter to the Soviets in their setup for Ingria, and that'll give them a bit of an edge, and also probably allow them to spend money on other things besides just infantry, also combined with these other setup changes. And I looked into it, and the Soviets had an overwhelming air force in comparison to the whites. Like I'm talking like the Soviets had like hundreds, like 300, 400 or whatever functional planes at their disposal, whereas the whites had like 56 or something like that. So we're adding a fighter to the Soviets in the Ingria setup, and the remaining units there are the same: 8 infantry, 1 artillery, 1 cavalry. And in Central Russia, because that's 1 more unit that can theoretically attack Archangel, we are removing 1 infantry from Central Russia. So Central Russia now for the Soviets has 7 infantry, 2 cavalry, 3 artillery. Okay. We are adding 2 infantry to Turkmenia. So there's now 5 Soviet infantry in Turkmenia to start off the game. This also kind of represents that even when the whites were dominating in the Russian Civil War, they never fully kicked the Soviets out of Turkmenia and fully controlled this area. So we want to make this a little more of an annoying nut to crack. And then we are adding 1 infantry to Siberia. So now Siberia has 4 infantry for the Soviets. Additionally, we are removing 1 white infantry from Urals. And then in my last update, I had announced both of these changes, but I'm clarifying this one, and I am updating this one. So Amur originally had 2 infantry, 1 artillery. We are now swapping 1 infantry for a cavalry. Okay, and then in Premarie, I believe I had it correct in my previous videos when talking about it, but I actually realized on our update file we had a little error here. Whoops, we had an error here, and I accidentally, in our original update file, accidentally only had 1 artillery listed. So we had it as 4 infantry, 1 cavalry, 1 artillery. There should be 4 infantry, 2 artillery, 2 artillery, and 1 cavalry in Premarie. So there's that. So just clarifying that. That's not new. It's just a kind of correction of a mistake. And yeah, so this way, if they spread out, there's also whites up here. That setup isn't changing at all, but it's just making it so like at least the 3rd unit here is more of a fodder unit than a legit defense unit. All right, so that covers the Russian Civil War setup changes. Then coming over to tech. Okay. So, roll of a 6 has historically been a choice of a naval port or a military base. However, and you could only place it in original territories that you control. However, more often than not, we found that this tech, getting this as the tech, and this is the only option with it, kind of bones the player depending on the power. Like it's a useless tech for Russia to get more often than not. I mean, maybe you can put one down in eastern Ukraine, but it's a pretty useless tech for Russia, and maybe they just don't want it. And it's kind of a useless tech for like Germany to a degree. Like you could use it in some instances, like kind of it is nice to have one in Alsace, but sometimes you just want something different, right? And US, once they're at war, if they get a tech breakthrough, then like this is more often than not kind of a useless tech. And then we did change it so that we did previously change it so that you could buy them. And if you bought them, with their kind of expensive, $15 for a military base, 15 IPCs, and then 20 IPCs for a naval port. Military bases can spawn, mobilize 3 land units, either infantry, cavalry, or trucks. Naval ports can mobilize up to 2 C units. You know, all this is pairing with the IPC of the territory. So if like the naval port is here in Tunisia, you can only spawn 1 C unit out of there, and they can repair 1 dreadnought per turn and mobilize transports, cruisers, or subs. But they can't mobilize dreadnoughts, right? So we're changing this a little bit to make this more interesting via tech rolling. And from now on, if you roll a 6, it's essentially a wild card. You can now choose between a military base or a naval port to place in any contested, any controlled original territory or originally aligned territory that you control that's aligned to your power. I'm probably phrasing that I'm probably not phrasing that the best. But anyway, if say Austria-Hungary gets a 6 and they choose a naval port, they can place it in Bulgaria. Okay, they can't do a military base there because it already has land unit building capability. But America, if they got a military base via tech and they control Brazil, they'd be able to place it in Brazil. You know, Germany, if they got a military base via field technology, and they've already mobilized Chile and they control Chile, they can place a military base there now. Okay. So that's one thing. You can, if you roll a 6, you can choose either of those, or if you don't want that, because a lot of powers, like I said, don't want that. It's not very handy for a lot of powers necessarily. And all the other field techs are pretty great for the most part. Super happy with them. So this one, we're like, how can we make this better? So if you roll a 6, you can choose, in field technology, you can choose either of these 2 facilities or player's choice of the other techs. So if you roll a 6, you can choose between. You can either pick a facility, or you can choose any of these other techs: minefields, improved sea mines, elites, poison gas, machine guns, or trench works. You can choose any of those techs now. So now it's a wild card. So literally 6 is now the best thing. It went from being the worst thing to rolling for some things, for some powers, and now it's the best thing to roll for. So that also like encourages and like kind of encourages people to invest in tech, and so on and so forth. And more often than not, because I had concerns about Austria-Hungary being able to mobilize in Bulgaria, mobilize a naval port in Bulgaria. I had concern about that being overpowered because it double dips with the improved sea mines that the Ottomans have here naturally. But ultimately, I think if Austria-Hungary does get a 6, more often than not, they're probably going to want something else than a naval port. Maybe they do want a naval port, but maybe they want more often than not, they probably want something else. And because of simply just because we changed to have an exception originally to have it so that if you bought them, you could place them in aligned territories, but ultimately just to prevent user player error, we're just going to keep it consistent. And so if you buy them or if you get them via tech, you can put them in aligned territories if you want them. But just to clarify, only the original aligned power can mobilize a base in here. So if Germany, if Austria loses control of this and then Germany or the Ottomans take control of it, they can't build a facility in there. Okay, just to clarify that a little bit. All right, what else? Okay, so the U.S. setup and the Zimmerman telegram. We are tweaking the Zimmerman telegram because in our game, when Rick Madman got successful at the Zimmerman telegram, then it kind of became like, okay, so then what do I do with these guys? And because Mexico was kind of declaring war if the Zimmerman telegram is successful, we felt that it would probably be very beneficial to give Germany a bit more flex with that. This doesn't apply if Germany aligns Mexico, but if the Zimmerman telegram is successful, then Germany gets a military base down in southern Mexico, so that on Germany's turn they can immediately start building 3 units there and really tie the U.S. up more, but also actually threaten U.S. territories to a further degree, rather than them just sitting there, So just to make this a little more interesting, if Germany comes in here and aligns Mexico with their transports, they don't get that military base. It's not part of the setup, but if the Zimmerman telegram is successful, military base goes down in southern Mexico. Okay. And to balance that a little bit, we had to adjust the United States setup a little bit too, and also we changed a C unit movement for the U.S. Rule, which I'll get into in a second. But I'm going to go over the setup changes first. So everything here is the same from before. Eastern United States, we swapped 2 infantry for 2 cavalry. Give a little more flexibility. Originally, U.S. has a cavalry here and a cavalry here. Now they have 4 cavalry. Okay, so swapping 2 infantry for 2 cavalry. So it's 3 infantry, 2 cavalry, 2 artillery in the Eastern United States setup. We are adding an infantry to Alaska. We are adding a 2nd infantry to the Philippines. We were thinking about adding a U.S. cruiser in Season 50, but we've decided against that. So that's not happening anymore. And we've added a infantry in Hawaii. Okay? So there's that. We've also added 1 more transport for them to start with. They start with a cruiser and a transport in 5. Now they have a transport in Season 4. Okay? So transport, cruiser, dreadnought in Season 4. Okay, and that leaves the last few things that are cool. So when U.S. gets into the conflict, by the time that they can, because of the turn limits and stuff, at the end of our game, there was a lot of U.S. stuff that just wasn't in like a good position to like really do anything. Some of it was effective, but a lot of it just wasn't super effective, at least, or whatever. And just to make this area more interesting, and also kind of speed up the movement of the game, We are changing a U.S. movement restriction for them while they're neutral. So normally the United States can only stay within if they're neutral, they can only stay in their original territories or sea zones adjacent to their original territories. So now, if the United States is neutral and at the top of their turn, the Central Powers have the empire point. Not that they've reached the empire point and then lost it, but during the United States turn, the Central Powers have the empire point. Then what that means is that the United States movement restrictions in the Atlantic are lifted, or most of the restrictions are lifted, rather. The United States can now load their transports and move their sea units and go to any sea zone in the Atlantic, only the Atlantic Ocean. Restrictions still exist in the Pacific. And if somehow they get up here, they can't go into the Baltics, the Baltic Sea. They can't come in there. They can't come into the Mediterranean. They can't sneak into the Indian Ocean if they even somehow get down here. But basically, they can move into any sea zone that is not adjacent to a Central Power controlled territory, and the sea zone contains Central Power sea units. So if the sea zone contains Central Power sea units, they can move in there. If the sea zone is adjacent to, say Central Powers controlled Brittany, but there's no Central Powers ships, no subs or anything. Transports, yes, because they're not warships. But if there's no Central Power warships in Sea Zone 19, then the U.S. can just come right in there. But if they have control of Brittany and they have a sub in 19, then U.S. cannot come into 19. And it's only for ending movement. They could theoretically go through it. They just can't end their movement there. Okay? So that will allow the United States to get into a more of an interesting and impactful position when they come into the war and join the war. What else? Yeah, so that should make U.S. a little more interesting, much more interesting to play. If the Central Powers lose the Empire point on like a following turn or whatever, the limitation doesn't revert. Once the Empire point has been reached, which can be round 3, maybe even round 2 if you're adventurous enough, it could be round 3, round 4, etc. They can start moving in and start bringing their stuff over. So that's really cool. And then the final update, the final bit for you is contested territories. This might seem like it's a bigger deal than it is, but anyway, so at the very end of the game, right? You have what side controls the highest number of victory points. Well, what if a territory is contested? So it kind of stinks if, like, say, France contests Belgium and Germany has one guy left, and France has overwhelmingly more units, but France doesn't get control of that territory, right? So we're adding a thing where at the end of the game, territories that are contested, if one side has dominance, then they don't control the IPCs for that territory, but they essentially control the territory. They acquire the contribution from that territory to any relative victory points, right? So what is dominance? How do you establish dominance? So what Madman and I decided upon, and it kind of came into play in our game, but just barely didn't, in Belgium specifically, which is why I set stuff up here. So if one side has 5 or more units, and the other side has less than 5 units, then the side with 5 or more units has dominance, right? So then if, say, there was 4 German infantry here, Belgium was contested, and France has 5 infantry. That means the Allies have control of Belgium to contribute to the Western Front victory point, the favorable trade victory point, etc. In our 1.5.2 game, Germany ended with exactly 5 units there, so they contested the territory legitimately, and so Belgium didn't go to anybody's victory points, or didn't contribute to anybody's victory points. If both sides have 5 or more, it's still legitimately contested. If it's just if neither side has 5 or more units, then it's still legitimately contested. But if there's that swing of, like, one side has 5 and one side has less than 5, then the side with 5 or more acquires the contribution to a victory point from that territory. All right. So that about does it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. You can also send me an email at moosecowhq@gmail.com, and so on and so forth. We're excited to get this thing out. This puppy has been brewing for quite some time, and it's a fun game. So yeah, basically about covers my announcement. I will be posting, I will do another video when we have the rulebook files and update files ready, but this is just kind of give you a sneak peek of the final changes for Kings and Kaisers version 1.5. Thank you so much for watching. Have a happy new year, and roll some dice. Take it easy, guys.